A heavy morning fog has settled over Meridian. Although, given its height, we could also be caught in a cloud, I suppose. Or, perhaps, this is lingering smoke from the fire set by Ilahn in Issue 1. A shadowy figure emerges from it. Young Jad, who Sephie supposedly has a crush on. He's dressed in simple brown and tan clothing. On his belt, he has a knife and a length of rope. Jad looks behind him, trying to see how close his pursuers are. This causes him to trip, and now finally stopped, we can make out the figures and shapes behind him. Ilahn's forces from Catador are making their way into Meridian, armed with a flag, swords, and spears. A small flying boat with 4 wings cruises forward. It looks like it moves slowly, but, the static image of a comic book doesn't really allow for a solid depiction of speed. Sephie's narration says that most other cities rushed to expand. They would add ore pods to the bottom of their city, allowing them to add more mass up top, creating greater cities. But not in Meridian. They preferred to live a balanced life. As Jad sees the Catadorian, Sephie muses, "It was always so peaceful there." Contrast achieved, author Barbara Kessel. A hissing from a nearby building catches Jad's attention. An old man waves him inside, and Jad goes in. "They're everywhere," he says. "I need to get to the minister's residence." The old man, named Ruin, shakes his head. "I'd stay out of the streets. They're rounding everyone up. Better to take Sephie's road." And he points at the roof over their heads. In Catador, it is a much different story. What small glimpses of the city that we get are gray and black, obscured by the smoke from industrial fires. The buildings are carved from stone or built of marble, maybe. Domed roofs are peaked by tall spires. Streetlights line the cobblestones. If Meridian is the perfect example of natural beauty, then Catador is a testament to artificial beauty. Not that it feels very welcoming right now. Sephie rides in Ilahn's personal coach, which is pulled by 2 large birds. If this were a Final Fantasy game, I would call them chocobos. "Catador wears peace like a beautiful robe," Sephie's narration notes, hiding its weapons inside the folds. As the floating coach moves through the city streets, they can hear rumors fly by that Catador has invaded Meridian. They're taking over. Sephie sits up. She's dressed in a pink dress with a notable addition to her clothing, a headscarf pulled down over her sigil that we saw her get from Ilahn back in Crossgen Chronicles Issue 1. "What are they talking about?" she asks. "Are they talking about Meridian?" Uncle Ilahn is busy staring at the floor. "It's just street talk. Don't trouble yourself with rumors, Sephie." She sticks her head out of the window to hear better. "But if something has happened, her father said that she has a responsibility to Meridian first. She has to go home." If Ilahn had been drinking something, he would have done a spit take at that. "Home? Yes, you do have a responsibility to Meridian. To stay here, to learn and grow, to become a great minister for Meridian. If you return now, then Meridian would be ruled by an amateur, unschooled in the tricks of the trade. Is that how you view being responsible?" Chagrined, Sephie lowers her eyes. "No." Her uncle looks away and sits back. "Well, you're learning already. Good girl. You will remain here in exile. We'll place a regent in charge of Meridian in the meantime to ensure order and continue production. And they will ferret out any further traitors. Your would-be assassin might not have been acting alone." How right you are, Ilahn. How he can say any of that with a straight face, I will never know. Sephie still doesn't understand why anyone on the island would want to hurt her, but Ilahn does very well. With her father dead, she became a living target. Do you have any idea how much wealth Meridian represents? You inherit it, yes, but without the proper power base to actually rule, there will always be those who want to take what you have. And until we know who that could be, you'll be safer here. Sephie turns to look out the window again. It seemed like her whole childhood was washing away. fading into the gray streets of Catador. But it was only her childhood ending, she notes. One day earlier, she was racing through her island, thinking about Jad. And we transition over to Jad immediately, which is a nice transition. Y'all know that I like a smooth transition between scenes, and this is one of them. That's tasty. But before we get into that, my name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown episode 32.3 of Meridian, Gilded Cage. The opening scene of this comic, with Jad running through the morning mists on Meridian, works really well. I cannot compliment this moment enough with how well it engages in that classic show don't tell style of comic book storytelling. I love seeing Jad emerge from out of nowhere. I love seeing the shadows behind him. Colorist Michael Atiyeh makes the whole page an ephemeral brown, and brown is not often considered a beautiful color. I've even dogged other comics for it when they've been lazy in their application of brown, just slapping it all over a comic page. But here, we get a lot of variations of brown, and that makes it feel like the thick pea soup style fog, right? Jad's clothing also being brown makes him blend in, but it also is the only solidly drawn thing on the page, his physical form, and so he immediately catches our attention against that mostly brown background. I also love that he moves across the page, starting from the left-hand side and then running diagonal to our right. The implied movement is great. I love this stuff. This is the kind of stuff that I love to see on a comic book page, where it's not just a static image, it implies movement, it implies time, it implies depth. Beautiful. So much good stuff here. From a penciler's perspective, though, I won't lie. This single page feels pretty lazy. Like, this is perhaps the easiest page to draw out of the entire comic. And if I was a publisher and I had to pay an artist's full page rate for this, I would feel pretty put out. But this is one of those cases where the work of the colorist is shown to be absolutely necessary and just highlights how much work a colorist can do in a comic book. Atiyeh's work making the fog, coloring Jad, and hinting at the soldiers behind him is crucial to this page, and it is incredibly well done. We also last saw Jad at the docks when the boats first arrived. Him fleeing from that same direction implies that he lives somewhere near the docks, which historically is home to people of a lower economic stature. So these scenes tell us that Sephie is the heir of Meridian, and Jad is one of its employees. She is a princess, and he's the blue-collared kid who fell for her. This is further emphasized when he tells Ruin that he's headed to Sephie's place, and then he corrects himself. I mean, to the minister's house, not Sephie's house. Why would I say Sephie's house? That's crazy. Where does Sephie even live? Does Sephie even have a house? Who is Sephie? I've never heard that name before. Someone please kill me. Is it obvious that I have a crush? I love these kids. This is adorable. And Ruin tells Jad to use Sephie's road, which also tells us that the shortcut that she took in issue 1 is a normal thing. Everybody knows about it. She doesn't just run on the roofs occasionally. She does it often enough that they've got a nickname for it. This also shows us how comfortable Sephie is when she is not on the ground, which is going to be important later on. Sephie's main scene with her uncle Ilahn demonstrates how different their concerns as people are. Sephie is obviously concerned for the people of Meridian, and how the loss of Turos and now her is going to affect them. She's been looking at Ilahn's actions here so far as keeping her safe, but now she's getting her first hints that this might not be the truth of the situation. Catador invading Meridian? That's a bad thing. But her uncle sells it to her here as a good thing. It's not an invasion, it's a peacekeeping force. And for Ilahn, it definitely is a good thing, right? That's what he wants. He wants control of Meridian. He wants the wealth and power that merging it with Catador would represent. And now he's got it in his clutches. We are seeing a clear and obvious demonstration of how different Sephie and Ilahn are. And this is also the first time that Sephie really gets to see it. I particularly like how smooth Ilahn is in this scene. The way that he uses Sephie's own sense of responsibility against her to trick her into letting him run Meridian, super clever for a bad guy. It's a perfect demonstration of how Ilahn's mind works, and it's a great extension of his stated goal of protecting her. He isn't taking over Meridian for his benefit, my dear niece. He's doing it to help her out. And he'll just happen to profit off of it in the meantime. All she has to do is be quiet and do what she's told. But we know that Sephie breaks the rules back on Meridian, that she makes her own way, Sephie's way. How likely is she to listen to her uncle here? Now that I have ruined Barbara Kessel's excellent scene transition, let's remember that Sephie was musing about adventuring on Meridian, daydreaming about Jad, who is currently dashing across the rooftops of Meridian, breathing hard. From the ground, a squad of masked Catadorian soldiers spot him. They all wear similar clothing, a blue-black top and pants, dull red gloves and boots, and blue masks that cover their whole faces. Small, round goggles allow them to see out, but it also gives them an inhuman appearance. They don't look like people. They kinda look like monsters. "Don't lose this one!" one of them shouts. "We need to know how so many Meridianites keep disappearing!" Jad reaches the end of the current roof, and he freezes. An enormous blaze has engulfed Sephie's house. "No, no, no, no! Sephie!" he shouts. The troopers close in, climbing up onto the roof. Spotting them behind him, Jad looks around for an escape, and across the street, a woman named Freesia waves to get his attention. "Hey, Jad, come over here!" "Aren't you surrounded?" he asks, and she says that yeah, they are, but they have the other roads open. Jad's face lights up. "Dad told me about those! I can't believe I'll actually have a chance to use them!" He pulls the rope off of his belt, ties it into a lasso, and prepares to throw. But we bounce back to Catador. The rumors have persisted along their travels, and Sephie is continuing to get more upset. When they finally return to Ilahn's estate, she and Ilahn are greeted by a crowd of businessmen, busybodies, and others, all with their own concerns. "Will the annexation of Meridian interrupt the delivery of ships? Will profits show this quarter? How will the shares be apportioned? What about when can we—" "Silence!" Minister Ilahn shouts. "Catador has not invaded Meridian. We are simply creating a protectorate enforcing discipline and the rule of law necessary in the aftermath of Minister Turos' death. I have asserted control of Meridian to ensure its future for my niece, Sephie, who has been tragically orphaned. We will begin to take steps to merge our two economies together, the inefficient Meridian with our glorious own." And the crowd is pleased to hear it. A murmur of approval rumbles through them, and they nod. "Oh, about time. The right thing to do, after all. Well done." Standing behind her uncle, Sephie is disgusted, disappointed, surprised, maybe both, maybe all, to learn that the businessmen of Catador approve of Ilahn's tactics. Do none of them realize what this means for the people of Meridian? And no, Sephie. Businessmen only care about money. They do not care about the human beings that it takes to make that money. In her narration, Sephie says that part of her did understand the business motivations behind such a decision. But another part of her whispered, "What about my friends?" And we smoothly transition back to Chad throwing his rope. Oh, man, I need some kind of like nice transition clip that I can play when this stuff happens. Jad throws his lasso, and it does circle a wooden decoration on top of the building. He made it! As he shouts in glee, the rope then just slides right out of his hands. He starts running. His no choice now. With the Catadorian troopers right on his tail, he runs the length of the roof, jumps, and he slams into the railing of the building that he was aiming for. It takes a try or two, but he does scramble inside. Below, in the streets, the Catadorians kick in the door of the building. They saw Jad go in here. They've got him now. But once they're inside, they discover that the building is empty. Actually, other than the interior balcony to match the one that Jad entered from, there is nothing inside this building at all. No other rooms, no crates, nothing to hide in, nowhere to go. Back on Catador, Ilahn has continued to speechify, really enjoying having his people's attention and approval. But a small, elderly-looking woman appears from seemingly nowhere. She is barely as tall as Ilahn's waist, and she is bundled up in gray robes. Her white hair is pulled back in a bun, and orange light seems to peek out of her deep-set, shadowy eyes.
"Strong words from the mouth of the man who would plant the kiss of death on his brother's lips,"
she hisses, and Ilahn is shocked to hear this. "She knows?" he whispers to himself. "Who are you, creature?"
"I am the one who sees what is to come. Two sides in opposition, never to touch,"
she croaks, pointing a sharp finger at Ilahn. At his throat.
"I see your sigil, even though you hide its outer aspect."
Ilahn's hand shoots to his throat, which is covered by his tall collar. "Bosco!" he shouts to his attendant. "Have that woman brought to my study. Have her cleaned first, though." He then says farewell to the crowd and takes his leave, moving us into the Catadorian Palace. Some undisclosed amount of time later, Sephie is trying to leave the... palace seems too fancy for this place. The minister's residence. That's what I'm going to call it. That sounds better. She is trying to leave the minister's residence and explore Catador, but the various staff aren't letting her. Some say that young girls shouldn't be out so late. Others say that she should use this time to prepare for tomorrow. And another says that it just isn't safe for girls to go out at night. And I just want to take a moment to point out that Sephie was perfectly fine running around Meridian. It was safe. She was not concerned at all. Hell, she wasn't even concerned about flashing us as the audience. This shows us, in retrospect, how safe Meridian was, how kind the residents were, and how they took care of one another. We might not have seen that kind of behavior in regards to Sephie in Issue 1, but we have been seeing it done with Jad now in Issue 2. And so we associate the Meridianites' behavior to Jad with Sephie, and we now believe/know that they take care of one another. This moment isn't just an example of how stifling the staff of Ilahn's residence is, and how unused to that Sephie is, it also demonstrates how different the people of Catador are from the people of Meridian. Turos knew that their cultures were worlds apart, and Sephie is now getting to learn that firsthand. "They can't stop me like this," Sephie swears to herself, and then an idea occurs to her. They can't stop her. Acting the role of the minister's niece, she uses her authority to dismiss the women that were assigned to her. The taller of the two is fine with this. She's clearly annoyed at Sephie's behavior, but she also has something more important to do. In short order, the attendant delivers the old woman who accused Ilahn of murder to his study. She apologizes for the lack of updating to her, but the woman refused. The old lady walks in.
"You wish them to change me, but I refuse to be changed. I am what I chose to be. You have changed." "I see,"
she says after a thought and a brief stare at Ilahn.
"She called you Heart Stealer."
Slumped in a plush chair, Ilahn demands silence. He quickly stands and dismisses the aide. Turning to look at this older woman, Ilahn sneers. "Who are you? And how do you know about this?" He pulls down his collar, exposing the sigil, which glows with angry red energy.
"I see because I am the Muse of Giatan. The eyes show me. I am the eyes."
"Do not plague me with riddles!" Ilahn shouts, his right hand glowing with red energy. "Tell me the secret of this power, or feel it destroy you!" But the Muse isn't shaken by his temper at all. If anything, I think that she looks amused.
I am older than time, young man, and I will outlive the memory of you,
The Muse says.
Your power will not frighten me. What you wield is so great, but you use it so small. You must expand your imagination.
Ilahn calms himself. Teach me then. You will teach me everything. Back in Sephie's room, she puts her plan into action and tears at her long skirt, fashioning a crude rope. She then climbs out the window, something that she is quite comfortable with back on Meridian. She might be here on business, technically, but if she was going to live here on Catador, then she was going to get to know the city. So she did. Never announcing her presence allowed Sephie to move through the city like a ghost. Uncle Ilahn ruled Catador, but he didn't actually live on it. He has his own private island that was tethered to the bigger island. The people who lived below the rim weren't treated as well as those who lived above it. They lived in the same city, sure, on the same island, but there was a sharp economic divide in its people. They hated Minister Ilahn for enforcing this division, telling stories about how hard he could be. It quickly became clear to Sephie that Uncle Ilahn was a good minister, his island was prosperous, but he was not a good man. And Sephie says that she knew inside that he wasn't as good a man as her father, but she had never gotten the chance to see who he really was, how he acted. He wasn't a good man, and now he was in control of Meridian, her home. Oh, Papa, I know just what you'd say. Life has tossed you a twist. Try to bend with it. But this place, it just isn't home. At the minister's residence, Ilahn burns red as he works with the Muse. He'll do this all night if he must in order to get the Muse's secrets. Tell me, he asks, can Sephie do this too? The Muse humphs.
The two share no looks, no likes, no direction. Why do you think two would share the same power?
A golden light now envelops Sephie, restoring her torn dress. The head covering that she wears flares when the sigil does so, revealing its primarily yellow light. Ilahn destroys. Sephie creates. So we had quite a bit happen here. First off, on Meridian, we see that the people on Meridian are prepared for this. We haven't seen it yet, like we have just a hint of that idea demonstrated here, but there are clearly secret tunnels in secret locations that would secretly allow for a secret, quiet, safe, secret mass evacuation of the island. Perhaps Turos wasn't absolutely blind to his brother's ambition, which I like. Ilahn's dialogue and behavior at that party was so obviously bad guy to an outsider that honestly it kind of made me think that Turos was maybe a bit of a trusting idiot. Like, how do you not see how badly this guy wants what you got, my dude? But having it hinted now that Turos did know his brother, that he did see something like this coming someday maybe, and he was willing to prepare his people for it, really makes me appreciate Turos as a minister more. That underhanded part of his nature is something that is just hinted at here, and it's not really expanded on very much in the future, but it's something that Sephie has yet to learn. It also kind of hints that Turos was trying to teach Sephie how to be a good minister, but he was also trying to protect her from the harsh realities of the world. Because he did not warn her about his brother at all. And admittedly, he was hoping not to die when he did, so he was kind of just trying to stay alive until Sephie was age. She could inherit Meridian, and then hopefully she would know better than to make large power deals with her uncle. Secondly, we have now met the Muse of Giatan, who will play an important role in this comic going forward. If you were reading multiple crossgen titles, then the Muse follows an odd trend that you would have seen in all 4 books. Every sigil bearer ended up having an orange-eyed fellow hanging around them that we fans referred to as a mentor. Over in Scion, that character was Skink, the lesser race's jester who basically raised Ethan. Here in Meridian, that character is the Muse of Giatan. Obviously, she has a slightly more complicated situation to deal with because she's got two sigil bearers who are going to need mentoring. But where she came from and what she wants is yet to be revealed. Right now, she definitely knows more than either of our protagonists about their sigil, and she appears to want to teach them. I do think it is a very obvious hint at where the Muse comes from when she says that the eyes see everything, the eyes tell me, and all four cross-gen comics specifically opened with a pair of eyes discussing the situation that would lead to the creation of the sigil bearers. What does this mean? In retrospect, it becomes really obvious, as when I was first reading this comic, I have no idea. And it doesn't help because the word Giatan, or Giatan, I am not sure how you would want to pronounce it, doesn't appear to have a specific origin here on Earth. Like, Giatan is not something that we've seen in the cross-gen universe at this time, nor do we ever really learn what it means going forward. Is this a place? Is this a person? I don't really know. Google tells me that Giatan isn't a word with a specific meaning at all. It can be a last name, but with no meaning that I could really find. It could be an evolution of the name Giatan, G-A-I-T-A-N, which is a Spanish surname, meaning one who comes from the port. And given that the planet of Demetria has floating islands and everybody travels by floating ships that come and go from ports, that could just be a super vague way of saying that the Muse is a traveler, if that is what she is referring to by saying Giatan. Don't really know, though. Personally, I love the Muse. She is easily the least visually appearing of the mentor characters, and she is also the most absolutely confounding. While Skink was definitely treated as a quiet, withdrawn, and mysterious person, when Skink did say something to Ethan, it was generally pretty obvious what he meant. The Muse, however, speaks intentionally in riddles. And I mean, hell, she doesn't even tell us her name. She tells us a title. I am the Muse of Giatan. Of course, we have the added difficulty of her coaching Ilahn in the use of his sigil first, making Sephie even more of an underdog in this upcoming conflict between the two of them. And then finally, we see Sephie break out on her own, reinforcing everything that we saw hinted at in the first issue. We see her intelligence displayed when she uses the staff's fear and respect of her uncle in order to dismiss them. We see her cunning when she tears apart her skirt to create a rope ladder, playing off the rope ladder that we saw her use to get into her room back in issue 1. And then she listens to and observes the people of Catador in order to learn about the culture, the society, and ultimately how they feel about her uncle. The fears that have been building in her this entire trip, that her uncle maybe isn't really looking to help her out here, are finally confirmed on this adventure. To me, this shows how prudent Sephie is as a future minister. Sure, she might be creeped out by her uncle, but she isn't going to make a huge decision based on her own personal gut feeling. She wants evidence. She wants confirmation. And she does end up getting it. Uncle Ilahn isn't just a bad man when compared to her father. He's a bad man, period. And it's going to be her responsibility to get back to Meridian and put things right. Not just for her sake. She's not doing this for herself. She doesn't really hunger after the power of Meridian, but she wants to make sure that her people are safe and happy, and probably that her father's legacy is continued. Sephie's single line about the people who live below the rim being treated differently compared to those who live above it is the kind of line that goes over my head. This is a kind of line of dialogue that at the end of Scion issue 1 would have had me going, what are you talking about? I don't what just because I'm not familiar enough with the world to understand what this colloquialism means. Doing some context clues detective work, I am assuming that she means that there are people who don't live, like, if this is the island of Catador and there's more of it going down, and here I've got my hand held up and I'm displaying this is the bottom of Catador and here's the top where the people live, I'm assuming that the rim is the edge around and that there are homes built going down like we saw on the intro shot of the island of Meridian back in Meridian issue 1. The rim could simply refer to the rim of the top landmass of the island. So if you're rich enough to live on the highest level of Catador, well then you were living the good life, baby. But if you lived anywhere else, then you were struggling. I assume. We then see Sephie demonstrate her sigil power, and I won't lie. I don't know if this podcast makes me look smart or not, talking all this fancy talk about comic books and whatnot, but this is a moment where the point of the scene went over my head so many times when I was younger, because I had no idea what this final page was showing us. I'm talking, it took me months to realize what was going on here. And in retrospect, it's kind of obvious, right? We see Sephie tear her dress apart earlier in the issue, and then at the end of the issue, she uses her sigil, and her dress is returned to normal, and the sigil is glowing. Sephie has used the power of her sigil to recreate her dress, restoring it to what it used to be. Only an idiot wouldn't get that. Right, Ben? Well, it took me multiple rereadings of this issue, over months of doing those rereadings, to finally understand this scene. I don't know why it went over my head, my brain totally skipped the fact that she damaged the dress to begin with. Like, I remember seeing her glowing and being totally unimpressed by how issue 2 ended the first time I read it. Like, issue 1 ended pretty quietly. Issue 2 ends pretty quietly. Wow, Meridian sure is a laid-back comic, I thought. But no! This is actually kind of a big reveal. It is the first conscious use of the sigil by Sephie in Meridian, and it shows that her gift is the exact opposite of her uncle's, which then ties in with the dialogue from the Muse of Giatan, saying that the two of them have nothing in common. They are complete and utter opposites, and that's demonstrated here with their powers. They aren't just a study in contrast in their character designs and in their life philosophies, but also in their superpowers. And that means great things for drama moving forward. Next week, Ilahn's business lessons with Sephie demonstrate exactly who he is to her. The Muse gives Sephie a piece of information that leads her to finally confront her uncle, and ultimately to flee Catador. But Ilahn is not a man who lets things slip from his control. The attempt to capture Sephie just might kill her. Join me in a week for Comic Book Breakdown episode 32.4 of Meridian, Escape from Catador. If you enjoyed this episode of Breakdown, please make sure to hit that like button, and if you are not subscribed to the show, then click on that as well. I love getting feedback, and I would really appreciate it if you did so. If you have any questions, concerns, or would like to suggest a comic or a series to me, Breakdown can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and on a variety of podcast platforms, with links in the description for this episode below, as well as the email cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Thank you for your time and attention.